So I'm going to start by having you give us your name and sort of your title.
My name is Peg, and actually it's Margaret, but everybody except the nuns call me Peggy Poppity. I'm a nephrology nurse. I have my bachelor's degree from the University of Delaware in 1983, and I got my master's in health education from St. Joe's University in Philly in 1992. And I am a patient advocate, as well as a parent and wife of a patient.
All right. So beyond the obvious that you're speaking today, what brought you here today?
Well, I saw Dr. Jerkowitz at another conference, and I shared with her how I became a nurse. And she said, "Oh my goodness, you have to speak at this conference. You must speak at this conference." And I'm like, okay. So I'm here.
How does the conference help you?
The conference is very interesting. The more information I have, my way of dealing with just about anything is intellectualization. So I love all conferences. I like getting new information. I'm very excited about the fact that they have a transition area for the pediatric dialysis patients going to the adult dialysis patients, that we have that program here in Delaware, because it's very similar to the foster care situation where at 18 they're thrown to the wolves, and at 18 they don't have the mental facilities and they don't have the fear because you think you're never going to die. So if you're an end-stage renal disease patient and you're being covered by pediatrics, you're being covered very carefully, and then when you age out, it's like, oh, good, I'll go have pizza, it won't hurt much. Oh, I'll go have this, it won't hurt much. And they get into a lot of trouble. So having a transition area to go where there's not a whole lot of older people, it's not overwhelming for them, is a really good, excellent thing.
Why do you think patient involvement is so important?
The devil you know is always better than the devil you don't know. Okay, patient involvement is important, but even more so, even more than patient involvement with end-stage renal disease, the family involvement is important, because it's the family. If this is a man, then the wife is the one who has to cook. The wife is the one that's putting in front of them. And I've noticed with patients, men and women, if they get hospitalized, they go in the hospital and they'll come to the dialysis unit and they'll have a banana. Look what I have. You can't eat that banana. I know, but they gave it to me. Nurse gave it to me. So they think they're getting away with something. What we need to do, we need to have the patients have control of what's going on and know what's going on, but also the families, because a disease affects the whole family. It affects the patient, but the family has got to accommodate that disease, accommodate how to cook for it, how to care for it, and how to support it.
What drives you? What keeps you going with all this?
Advocacy. Advocating for my patients, advocating for my family, advocating for the renal community at large. It's important for me to stay involved because patients, when they go in the hospital or when they go to the doctor, they only hear possibly 10% of what that doctor is telling them. The doctor only has 10 or 15 minutes to speak. They hear maybe 10% of what that doctor has said, and they may mishear some of the stuff. In my instance, my husband went to the doctor before we were ever married, and he was told he had polycystic kidney disease. And he was told he shouldn't have children. He heard he couldn't have children. So when I was pregnant with my first child, he was elated. I didn't know I could have children, okay? The word was he shouldn't have children, because with autosomal dominant disease like polycystic kidney disease, 50% chance at every conception that child will inherit the disease. And lo and behold, I was told as a housewife that it came from the mother, because his grandmother had it, his mother had it. I was the mother, so I didn't have it, my kids would be fine. No. 3 out of 4 of my children did inherit polycystic kidney disease. So what you hear may not be what is said. So I advocate for patients to bring a caregiver or a person with them with a notebook And I also advocate for the person talking. I do this myself. I will say to the patient after I've talked to them, what did I just tell you that was most important? And it's funny, what they tell me is most important is not at all what I think is most important. But if it's important to them, then I have to focus on that. And then I can also introduce, well, you know what? I thought this was even more important. But you need to find out what your patient has heard. Is that helpful?
It's huge. It's huge. Let's see. What do you think is the most important issue to tackle
With what?
in the arena of sort of patient-centered CKD healthcare?
Continuing to have care. Everything is very, very up in the air now with trying to change the healthcare system. Continuing to have care for these people. They have enough stress in their lives. They have to go to dialysis 3 times a week. Or they're worried about the other shoe falling because they've had a transplant and they're paying for their transplant medications. Is that going to be denied me? Transplant medications are only available for 3 years post-transplant. Then what do? Is my insurance going to cover it? Am I going to have it? Am I going to lose my kidney? Am I going to have to go back on dialysis? They don't need that stress. We need to remove some of the stress from them. We need to have transplant medications the length of the transplant. We need to have ability to tell them, yes, you will be taken care of. Once you start dialysis, the United States has a great reputation. Once they do something to save a life, they don't end it. So I'm hoping that this continues and our care will continue for our patients.
You were talking about advocating and sort of being active. How do you advocate and stay active with that specific issue?
I'm on the State Chronic Renal Disease Advisory Board. We make sure that the patients get transport when they need to, get their supplements if they need them, help get their medications for them. We've also incorporated the transplant thing into that. But how much can we do? How much can the state be expected to do? And it's really the economic times are really tough. I advocate for the legislators. I've gone down to Washington for the PKD Foundation and advocated especially for the extenuation of transplant medication so that it's for the life of the kidney or the life of the whatever the transplant is, for the life of it, to keep this person. Transplant medication may cost $8,000 to $10,000 a year per person. Dialysis costs $65,000 to $75,000 a year. For the patient. Excuse me. Let's save the money. Let's keep these people going.
Overall, in the sort of greater scheme of things with healthcare and with sort of patient-engaged healthcare, how can we be better?
Involve the patients as much as possible. Involve the families as much as possible. Explain to the patients that they need to be involved. I think when you're involved in something, then you have a stakeholder in it. And that's what we need to keep encouraging.
Did I miss anything else?
How about tie up the year, like where we were and where we are now? Have you learned anything?
Yeah, okay.
Have I learned anything over what?
From last year to now, have you developed?
From last year to now, I learn all the time. I learn about how patients are dealing. I have a difficult issue. I have one son who is compulsive about what he does with his transplant and his medications, and it's all from fear of possibly losing the transplant. I have my husband's first cousin who is also compulsive. She was compulsive before, she's compulsive now, and she is very careful about what she does. Everything she does has got a purpose to save that transplant. I've learned that some patients, and my second son is this way, are like, it doesn't make any difference what I do. I'm on dialysis and I'm going to die. So I might as well just do whatever I want. It's scary because he's right. He's right. What can he do? He can possibly watch what he eats, watch what he drinks. But yeah, that's what's going to happen. And it's really scary to see how how different people are. These people, if something happens, when my husband's first cousin had to go on dialysis, she was absolutely devastated because for 4 to 5 years, she had been portioning her food. She'd been walking every day. She'd been doing this every day. I've done everything right. I didn't do anything. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I'm very careful. How could this happen to me? People have their own ways of coping. And I learn every year a different way, a different thing that they've used to focus on, to feel that they have control. It's a total loss of control. And to give them back control. What I do with my patients who are on dialysis, especially if they're new, they come in, they don't know me, they're in the hospital, I'm doing acute dialysis, and they have an access, and I know it's been there for a while, I can tell. And I can tell by the look on their face, okay, who is this person? Who's going to try and put these needles in me? And the first thing I do is I walk in and I say, hey, how long have you been on dialysis? Oh, I've been on dialysis for 6 years. I said, fine, okay, where do you want the needles? Huh? I said, well, you've been on dialysis 6 years? It's your choice. Tell me where, I got to put them in somewhere. Tell me where you want them. Or do you want to put them in yourself? Huh? What? I've taught my patients to put their own needles in. So I give them the opportunity. It's just like if the patient is a diabetic and they're in the hospital. Why does the nurse give the patient insulin? Give the patient the insulin and let them give themselves insulin. We take away control, and we need to give control back.
How do you feel about the study? Like, are you happy they have these concerns and they're asking people?
I'm extremely happy that they have these concerns.
So you're happy that they started this last year and here we are?
Oh, I think it's fantastic that they've started this thing. I think it's fantastic that you're listening to not only all the stakeholders, you're listening to patients. You've got Vinny talking about how it is to be a polycystic kidney patient. You've got me talking how it is to be both. And next year maybe you'll have someone else who has a different type of kidney disease that can come in and tell you what it's like for them to be on dialysis. I think the more we as medical people learn how the other feels, the other being the patient, what they have concerns about, what worries them the most, the better off we are, because we learn from them. They learn from us, but we learn much more from them.
Love it. That was great.
Okay?
That's great. Yeah, thank you. That's perfect.
Okay.
Thank you. That was awesome.